everybody, it's Christina of CraftyPaws. I'm here with another design team project for Topflight stamps. And this time I am featuring the really fun, adorable Studio Light background stamp that's called Cats and Girls. And it's basically a long definition of the variety of ways the word cat is used. And I thought that was really fun and great to not only make this card, but it would be great for anybody interested in mixed media who loves cats. So I'm starting off to create a background that has kind of a blanket texture, and I'm using the amazing Clarity stencil brushes that I picked up from Topflight Stamps. And I love these. Oh my gosh, it picks up the ink so well. And then when you use it to spread out the ink through a stencil like this, this is a Tim Holtz stencil called Plaid Layering Stencil. It's so soft. The transition between the colors is so soft. There's none of those marks from sponge daubers or blending tools. I absolutely love this. So I just smear the ink into the bristles of the brush, wiping back and forth. I'm holding the brush really low onto the bristles actually, and I'm just wiping back and forth. And look at how pretty that is. Oh my gosh, it's like a little rainbow. Now I wanted to extend the stenciling area further than the actual stencil width itself, so I'm just flipping it over and you can see you can make a continuous plaid that way. So I love this background stamp. I wish they had a doggy version, but this is for cat lovers, and I think it's a must-have if you guys do any kind of mixed media and you like cats. It's basically a definition of the word cat, but all different kinds. So it starts with a small domesticated carnivore, Felis domestica or Felis catus, bred in a number of varieties. Any of several carnivores of the family Felidae, as the lion, tiger, leopard, or jaguar. In slang, it's a person, especially a man, or a devotee of jazz. It can be a woman given to spiteful or malicious gossip. It can also be a verb. It's to flog with a cat o' nine tails. That's like that whip that like the British used to use. It can also be to hoist an anchor and secure to a cathead. That's like a nautical kind of use of the word cat. It can also mean to vomit. That's a British slang. And it says also cat around, which means to spend one's time aimlessly or idly. And then it can also mean to let the cat out of the bag, to divulge a secret, especially inadvertently or carelessly. So really cool definition of cat in its various forms. I've lined up the card front into the corner of my MISTI, and I'm inking up the background stamp with Memento Tuxedo Black ink. And I know I should probably use like VersaFine ink, something a little bit more detailed than Memento, but I like the way Memento cleans off of stamps. So I just decided to use that and do a multiple stamping of that. But that came out pretty well. Now for the main focal image, I decided to use an adorable cat image from the For the Love of Stamps Cute Kitties stamp set. And it's a cat that's lying on a pile of clean laundry. And I thought that went perfectly with the sentiment definition number 8, cat around, to spend one's time aimlessly or idly. And now I'm just doing some simple Copic coloring. I thought because the image areas are so small, it would go pretty quickly. Each area basically only requires 2 to 3 colors just to get the nice three-dimensional look added with the darker colors in the shadowed areas. And so I'm first coloring up this kitty to be an orange cat with dark gray stripes. And you can see I'm just taking my time, even though the image is small, trying to find the areas where I think there would be more shadows. And I'm doing that in the tail. I'm rounding the tail out so that the highlights are in the middle of that tail. I'm going to do the same thing with the grays. So I start with the lightest gray color. This is a warm gray, which is the family of colors that I like to use for live beings or animals. I like the warm grays. And in the belly and the muzzle area, I decide I'm going to do an even lighter area gray, almost white color. I'm taking the stripes and the nose even darker with the W7. And you can see I'm not coloring up the entire stripe areas. I'm leaving the center areas lighter so that I can go back in and blend out, and it makes the stripes look darker, but it doesn't make them look flat. If I were just to color everything in with a W7, it would make the stripes look super flat and the cat look more flat. For the first top blanket, I decide I'm going to make it into a floral. I've added some green for the leaves, and for the roses, I'm using 2 colors of red, just a pale R22 and an R24, and then I'm using some C0 just to add a tiny bit of shadow in the lower parts of the blanket. I realized I forgot or mistook that second back paw as part of the blanket. It's actually a paw, so I went back in and colored that with the orange real quick. And now I'm going to move on to the third blanket down. I've decided I'm going to make that into a blue and green stripe blanket. So I'm starting with my palest blue, and then I'm going to go in really quick and just do quick green stripes. It's the same green that I use for the flower leaves. And I like to try to repeat colors like that so that the image looks more kind of contiguous or cohesive. If you repeat colors, it tends to do that more easily. Now I've added in a slightly darker blue with the B24, and I'm using the same green just to add a second layer of pigment to add a little bit of shadow to the lower parts of those stripes. Now I'm going to go back in and color up that second blanket from the top, and I decide I want a pink. So I'm using a pale RV52 for the light areas, and then I'm going in and adding shadows with an RV55. And it's a pretty pink. It's not like a cotton candy pink. It's more of like a red violet. And then I decide for the blanket that's just kind of folded back and forth upon itself, I'm using yellow. I thought that would keep it really light and easy, and I've just used 2 yellow colors to add a little bit of shading to the folded areas. And for the next floral, I decide instead of like a traditional floral, I thought I would go back in and use an orange. So it's almost like it would be fruit or something, like little orange fruits with leaves. And I decide I'm going to add a little bit more detail, add some more fruits, just because there were some sparsely non-floral areas on that blanket. So I went back in and colored those in after I used a Copic marker a multi-liner marker to add a couple more circles for the fruits. The next blanket is colored in the oranges, and then I decide I'm going to color up the bra a red. So I'm again repeating the colors that I used in the roses into this bra, and I'm going to add shadows with the R24. So again, I'm using the same R colors, the R22 and 24, to add a little dimension to that bra. I thought I would make the top parts of that bra a more pink color, but for some reason it kind of clashed. That pink that I chose was a little warm, I think, and it didn't quite go. So I'm leaving that for a second, and I'm going to go and do the next check pattern blanket in a purple hue. So I'm coloring these, and you can see just below the bra toward the top, I miscolored one of the squares, but I'm not worried about that because I'm going to color in the alternate squares a darker blue BV color, so I can cover right over that mistake coloring the 2 squares together the same color. And I think this check really adds a nice dynamic feel. Now you might think all these different color blankets is kind of a hot mess, but I actually think it's kind of realistic. I mean, our laundry is not usually color coordinated. So now I'm going to go in and color in the stray sock. I decide I'm going to repeat that RV coloring. So I'm going to do a light RV and then a dark RV. And then I thought it kind of looked a little blah. I don't know. It was kind of blending in with my eye too much with that purple check fabric below it. So I'm going back in and coloring the lighter stripes with a W7. Now, remember, that was one of the warm grays that I used for the cat. So again, I'm repeating a color here. Even though it might look a crazy mess with all of these different colors, there is kind of a reasoning to this madness. For the basket, I decided I'm gonna, instead of going with a traditional kind of wicker look, I'm gonna go with the warm grays again to try and repeat those colors. I start with a base of the W0, go in with adding some shadows with the W5. Now I'm using the W3 to kind of blend the two, and I want to make sure that the highlights survive. So I'm doing a little bit of blending with this lightest W0 again. But now I decide I want the highlights. I want there to be more pop in this image. So I'm using a white jelly roll pen to add some details to that bra. And I'm adding a little highlight to the kitty's nose. I'm adding some polka dots to the striped socks in the pink areas. I think adding just these little tiny white details can add so much to an image. I decided even to color in the heel completely with the white. I'm going back and forth deciding whether or not to color in the toe of the sock. I decided not to. Now I'm adding highlights to the handle. So each of the little rounded areas of that woven handle, and in between each of the lines of the basket, I'm adding just a tiny bit of highlighting with this white jelly roll pen. And I think that adds a lot to the dimension. Now I'm using an MFT stitched rectangle die set, and I've cut out a little frame with that, and I'm lining the back of it with some vellum. And that's because I realized that the cat, along with that busy background, was just kind of getting lost in there. So I thought I would mute the background a little bit and frame the kitty by creating this little framed area with a softening vellum. Now I'm gonna use some spiced marmalade distress ink and ink the edges of the card front. But then I decide that's a little washed out, so I decide I'm gonna go over it again. So there's a little bit of dual inking blending on the edges with this black soot, and I like that much better. I decide I'm also going to ink the edges of the little framed area with black soot, and I think that that really helps make it stand out from the background, because that background is so busy. Now I'm going to, off camera, basically add little strips of double-sided foam adhesive to the back of this frame so that it rises a little bit above that card front. First, I'm going to just adhere that card front onto my card base, which is also orange. And now I'm going to take off all of the release paper from the back of this little framed area. And that's just going to add a hint of dimension, and also, I think, make the vellum act a little stronger in terms of muting the background, all of that text. And I'm using more of that foam adhesive to back the back of the kitty on top of the laundry. And I'm making sure that I even get a little tiny piece on the bra strap so that that's fully supported too. So I'm going to take all of the release paper off of these foam strips, and I think that will give this card a little bit of extra added interest. Now I decide that the sentiment that went with this stamped image is basically obscured now with the cat and the vellum and the frame. So I decide I'm going to just stamp out that portion of the sentiment background stamp. And what I'm doing is I'm taking my Versa marker and just inking up that part of the sentiment, that number 8 sentiment. And I'm going to stamp that out onto black cardstock. And of course you saw that I was already pre-prepped with my EK Success powder tool so that I didn't hopefully get too much excess embossing powder. And I'm using my favorite Ranger Superfine embossing powder, going over that, and you can see I got a lot of stray marks there because I wasn't careful enough with the Versa marker. So I got excess marker stickiness on that little piece of black cardstock. So now I'm taking a dry paintbrush and I'm going in and just removing those stray flecks of embossing powder. And I'm taking a super fine paintbrush to do that, and I realize I've taken off too much of the Y's at the bottom aimlessly or idly. So I am taking that marker and going directly in to add more of that marker and adding embossing powder again to those areas of that sentiment. And again, having to take off the excess powder, but I think that will get a really clean, crisp heat embossing of this sentiment. I'm recapturing the excess powder and I'm gonna heat emboss this sentiment now. So as you can see off camera, I cut apart the heat embossed sentiment, and I did that because I wanted to alter it a little bit. I wanted the sentiment to be centered under the cat image, and I also wanted to remove the word like and add a colon so that it's cat around colon with the definition. I also added some sequins, some fun star confetti and some sequins in orange, gold, and kind of a rust color. And I covered up the holes of all of the sequins with some champagne gold stickles, and I think that that adds a nice sparkle to the card. And that's my process video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up. And remember, if you're interested in this or any other international stamps, please check out Topflight Stamps. Thanks for watching, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful crafty day.